You feel it before you can name it. Controlled. Scrolling past midnight, angry at strangers, tired before the day starts, obeying rules nobody asked you to agree to. This is not weakness. It has a name, and one man named it before you were born. By the time this ends, you will know his name for it, and 5 ordered rules he lived and nearly died for. Rules built to break that control from the inside out. The last rule is the one that makes all the others work. Skip it, and you keep mistaking obedience for peace. Learn it, and you stop negotiating with your own captivity. Bob Marley called the system Babylon, not a place, a machine built to keep the mind asleep while the body walks free. Babylon does not need chains anymore. It needs your attention, your fear, your fights with people who look nothing like your enemy. Marley faced a version of it with guns pointed at his chest. You face it every time you unlock your phone. 5 rules. Ranked from the ground up. The 5th is where every free mind has to start, and the least obvious. The first is the one Marley bled for, the one that makes freedom permanent instead of borrowed. Rule 5. Name the chain. Before Marley could preach freedom, he had to diagnose captivity, precisely, without flinching, because a chain you cannot name is a chain you will defend. The chain wore its first disguise in Trenchtown, Kingston, in the 1950s, where a young Marley watched grown men praise the very poverty that was killing them, calling it humility, calling it God's will, calling it anything but what it was. He learned early that the most dangerous chain is the one wearing a virtue's name. Comfort calls itself peace. Silence calls itself respect. Fear calls itself caution. Marley refused every disguise, one at a time, out loud. This is the modern version. You call your scrolling research. You call your resentment justice. You call your paralysis patience. Until you name the chain by its real word, you will keep polishing it instead of breaking it. Name the chain is not therapy talk. It is the first act of rebellion, because a system built on confusion cannot survive precision. Marley's gift was never comfort. It was clarity, delivered gently enough to survive. Rule 4. Guard the gate. Marley did not read every newspaper Kingston printed. He was selective, almost ruthless, about what he allowed near his mind, because he understood something most people still refuse to accept. What you consume daily becomes the voice you mistake for your own thoughts. Marley filled his gate with scripture, with roots music, with elders, with silence in the hills above the city, and kept the noise of Babylon outside it. Modern Babylon does not storm your gate. It waits for you to open it 40 times an hour. Every notification is a stranger asking to stand inside your mind rent-free, and most people wave them all in. Guard the gate means auditing the voices narrating your day, the algorithms, the arguments, the outrage dressed as information. Marley protected his gate like a man who knew his mind was the last territory Babylon could not legally seize, so it tried anyway. 2 rules down. Neither one required a stage, a movement, or a single follower. They required only honesty and a closed gate. The next rule cost Marley considerably more, and this is where his story turns. This is why Marley kept his circle small, even as his fame grew global, refusing rooms that wanted a symbol instead of a man. Guarding the gate scales. It does not loosen just because the audience gets larger and louder. Guard the gate is not paranoia. Marley still sang for crowds, still spoke with journalists, still let the world in. He simply decided who held the key, instead of letting every voice with a signal walk straight through unquestioned. Most people assume their opinions are their own. Few ever audit where those opinions were manufactured, in which app, by which algorithm optimized for outrage instead of truth. That audit is Guard the Gate, and almost no one performs it. Before we go further, understand something. This is not history for its own sake. Every rule in this video is a tool, sharpened for your specific life, not a museum piece. If it is landing, that is Babylon's design failing in real time. This channel exists to hand you tools like this one, built from lives that paid full price for the lessons, so you would not have to. If Name the Chain or Guard the Gate has already shifted something, this is the moment to subscribe, not as a favor to us, as a vote for your own liberation, a public record that you are done outsourcing your mind to a system built to profit from it staying asleep. Marley would call that vote an act of worship. Now, 1976, Jamaica. An election year turned into something closer to a war. 2 political parties, armed, funding gangs in the same neighborhoods where Marley grew up, and both sides wanted him standing on their side of the line. Marley refused. He announced a free concert, Smile Jamaica, meant to calm a country tearing itself apart. and he refused to endorse either party from that stage and act both sides read as an insult to their cause. December 3rd, 2 days before the concert, 7 armed men entered his home at Hope Road. Gunfire tore through the kitchen. A bullet grazed Marley's chest and struck his arm. His manager and his wife were also hit. No one died that night. Here is the part most retellings skip. The men who fired those shots were not agents of some distant empire. They were young, local, likely paid, almost certainly convinced they were defending their own side of a war. Marley refused to join. Rule 3. Break the horizontal war. Babylon's oldest trick is not oppression from above. It is turning the oppressed sideways against each other, so their fury lands on neighbors instead of the system profiting from the fight. Marley understood, bleeding in that kitchen, that the gunmen were not truly his enemy. They were fellow prisoners, aimed at him by people who never once entered the room. Real power rarely pulls the trigger. It only has to point the finger. 2 days later, arm in a sling, Marley walked on stage at Smile, Jamaica anyway, and performed for 90,000 people who did not know if he would survive the night. He opened his shirt to show the wound before he sang a single note. That single decision rewrote the entire lesson. He was not proving he had no fear. He was proving the horizontal war would not choose his direction for him. He refused to let a bullet decide who his enemy was. Here is where it lives in your life. Every online argument with someone one paycheck away from you. Every family feud over politics neither of you profits from. Every coworker turned rival over scraps management controls. That is the horizontal war, rebranded for your century. Babylon does not need you defeated. It needs you distracted, aimed at the person beside you instead of the structure above you both. Break the horizontal war means asking one question before every fight. Who benefits if we destroy each other over this? Marley walked back into the crowd that shot at him and refused to name them the villain of his story. Not because he was naive, because he had already diagnosed where the real war began, and it was never at street level. This is the point most biographies call the climax. It is not. It is the hinge. What Marley did with that clarity 2 years later is the rule almost nobody names correctly, and it is where the video turns from survival to strategy. Rule 2. Forge the unity weapon. By 1978, Jamaica's political violence had only worsened. Marley, still carrying the wound from Hope Road, agreed to headline a concert built entirely around a single, near-impossible demand: peace between the two warring parties. April 22, 1978. The One Love Peace Concert. Both party leaders, men whose politics had fueled the very violence that nearly killed him, sat in the same audience Marley had once been shot for refusing to endorse. Midway through the set, Marley did something no one in that stadium expected. He called both leaders onto the stage, reached for one hand, then the other, and raised them together above his head in front of the entire country. Understand what that gesture actually was. Not forgiveness as surrender, forgiveness as strategy. Marley took the 2 men responsible for arming his own near assassins and turned their public image into a weapon for the very peace they had been profiting from denying. This is Forge the Unity Weapon. Reconciliation is not what you do when you run out of fight. It is what you do when you realize division was never your war to keep fighting. It was Babylon's tool, and you just took it back. In your life, this rule looks smaller but costs just as much. Reaching out first. Ending a silent treatment you secretly enjoy being right inside of. Refusing to let a grudge do Babylon's dividing for you. One more day, out of pride disguised as principle. Marley did not shake those hands because he had forgotten Hope Road. He shook them because he understood something most people never learn. Unity offered from strength dismantles a system faster than resentment ever could, no matter how justified the resentment is. 4 rules revealed. Name the chain. Guard the gate. Break the horizontal war. Forge the unity weapon. Each dismantles a piece of the same machine, but none alone makes freedom permanent. One rule remains, the one Marley staked his entire legacy on. This final rule is not louder than the others. It is quieter and far more dangerous to the system it opposes, because it cannot be arrested, exiled, or shot at close range in a kitchen in Kingston. Here's what makes it different from every rule before it. The first 4 can be taken from you by circumstance. This last one cannot be taken by anyone, under any condition, which is exactly why Babylon fears it most. Rule 1. Own the final mind. In his final years, weakened by illness, stripped eventually of his own body's strength, Marley kept returning to a single, unshakable idea in interview after interview, quietly, without theatrics. No government, no bullet, no illness, no prison could reach the one place he had already claimed as permanently his own mind. Everything else could be taken. That could not, unless he handed it over willingly. This is the rule underneath every other rule in this video. Naming your chain, guarding your gate, refusing the horizontal war, forging unity from strength. All of it depends on one prior fact. Nobody outside you can free your mind for you. Not a government, not a therapist, not an algorithm promising enlightenment in 9 seconds. Not even this video. Own the final mind means accepting that liberation was never going to be delivered. It was only ever going to be claimed. Marley spent his career pointing toward that ownership in melody instead of manifesto, because a sermon can be ignored, but a song gets hummed involuntarily for decades, planting the idea long after the listener stopped paying attention. Now turn the lens fully onto yourself. Not Marley, not Jamaica, not 1976. You. Which chain have you been calling a virtue this week? Name it honestly, before you keep defending it. What have you let stand inside your gate today that you would never invite into your actual home if it knocked and asked permission first? Who have you been fighting sideways, at your own level, while the actual source of the pressure stays completely untouched and unnamed? And where right now are you waiting for someone else to hand you a freedom that was only ever going to be yours to claim? Sit with that last one. It is the only question on this list that Babylon genuinely cannot survive you answering honestly. Before the final word on this, there is one more test, a short one, waiting for you now in the description. It asks how Marley would have handled the exact pressure closing in on your life this week. Pause the video before it ends. Choose honestly, not the answer that sounds strong. The real answer is the only one that will tell you anything useful about which rule you still have not claimed. Here is the framework to carry out of this video and into the next moment. Babylon tests you. Name the chain out loud in one plain word. Then ask who benefits if you keep fighting sideways instead of upward. Then ask what you would do next if no one was ever coming to free your mind for you. Not a parent, not a platform, not a leader, not this channel. Only you, standing in the one territory nobody can legally enter without your permission. That is the entire inheritance Bob Marley left standing on a stage with a bandaged arm, refusing to let a bullet choose his enemy, and later, refusing to let a grudge choose his future. 5 rules, 1 root. Freedom was never something Babylon was going to grant on your behalf, and it was never something a bullet, a border, or a bad year could fully take back once you had truly claimed it. Say it back to yourself the way Marley said it to a stadium that had every reason to stay divided. No one outside this mind gets to keep it chained. If that line means anything to you right now, subscribe before you leave. Not as a favor, but as your own public claim to the one freedom nobody can legislate away from you.